I'm wondering while we're waiting, we have our panelists. If you guys want to tell us what makes you feel 100, what either blood sugar or thing about your life right now makes you feel 100. CDN is having, well, I won't say anything else, but would love for our panelists to say what makes them feel 100 as we're talking about certain activity or a blood sugar or a part of your day. Just as we're waiting for folks to finish joining and getting set up on their screens and audio.
Okay, so I think something that makes me feel 100 is that at work, we just created a business resource group for those with disabilities. So I got to speak about my disability, which is T1D. And then afterwards, I get all these IM messages asking questions like, okay, I just got diagnosed. Am I doing this right? Or, you know, what should I do when I work? And I'm like, oh my goodness, y'all were listening. Like, whoa, that's crazy. And I'm like, this comes just in time for my anniversary, like next week. So I'm like, yes, I am for the inclusion, because a lot of times, you know, when we say type 1 diabetes and we see ourselves, it's like, okay, you don't see anything. But then when you actually get down and start talking about it, it's like, okay, this is real. And there's more than just me and, you know, my couple of friends or my fellows. So I think it's really awesome.
Thanks, Shay. What about somebody else? Cassie or Colin?
I would say today, my data analysis, my p-value was less than 0.05. So I was pretty happy about that.
That's awesome.
That had me feeling good today.
That's awesome. Incredible. P-value, I love that.
I feel 100 when I'm 120 specifically, because I feel like 100, I'm on the verge of going low, and you know, anything higher is just not close enough to 100. So I'd say 120 is the sweet spot for me.
Like that.
I love the enthusiasm behind that, Colin. Like, I'm feeling it.
Perfect. What about Zoe? And then we'll hear from Grazia.
I think my feeling 100 today was having the day off work and spending it with my puppy at home on the couch reading my book.
Well. I feel 100 when I actually can establish a good relationship the first time somebody comes to me from pediatrics. It's like, whew, I made it. Because that's not easy. Believe it or not, that's not easy at all. So there I feel like they're coming back. That's awesome.
Love that.
Oh yeah, you guys think it's easy for me? No, not at all. So if you ever think that you guys
when
think
we
it's
dig
hard for
in
you,
tonight, we will get to hear more about that.
yeah.
Did everybody go?
I don't know.
I think for me, I don't know if there's a specific number that makes me feel 100, but I think anytime I look at my CGM graph and I see that it's been steady on my pump for like 3 hours, I'm like, oh, today was a feeling 100 kind of day. Or I get that notification the next day where yesterday you reached your time and range goal. And that's always a good feeling. A good feeling. So kind of look back, and instead of looking back 90 days, even 24 hours of consistent blood sugars just kind of makes you feel good inside, or at least I do.
You know, Anna, that's awesome. Go ahead, Shay.
I will literally take screenshots when that happens. Like, it's just rare, and it just, you want to save this moment. Like,
I'll tell my mom it looks like a Dexcom ad. Like when I'm like nice and steady, I'm like, should send this for like PR and marketing.
I think that's me for like the blood sugar 104. They in the ads, it's always like 106 or 104 when you see like meters or graphs.
Reality check.
It's never under 100. It's always like right over 100, which is kind of funny. Awesome.
So I tell my people, you know what? When you have a bad day, just look at every crumb makes a meal. Little crumb by the time you get a nice meal at the end. Just don't focus on it, just every day. that makes them
Excellent,
interested.
excellent. All right, well, we are at a few minutes after 8 Eastern, so I want to make sure we are mindful of everyone's time.
Sure.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Anna Sabino. I am the Director of Young Adult Programs here at the College Diabetes Network. Thank you all so much for joining us in this special event in partnership with the ADA. If you're not familiar, CDN is a national nonprofit organization, and we are committed to providing young adults with the peer connections they value and the expert resources and support that they need to successfully transition to adulthood, and also live healthy and full lives with diabetes. The engagement of clinicians like yourselves who are really showing up after work hours to learn more about how to support this population is really inspiring, but truly integral to making our mission possible. We know there are a lot of perks that come with being an adult, but it can also be really intimidating, especially while managing a chronic illness like diabetes. Not to mention coming of age in the midst of a global pandemic. We've heard that many of you are here because you've either struggled to connect with or are just curious to learn more about how to best serve today's young adults and their ever-changing needs. I'm so excited for the learnings, for the conversations that will happen here tonight, thanks to our fabulous panelists that you will all hear from a lot, and our moderator. Dr. Grazia Aleppo is a professor of medicine in endocrinology, metabolism, and molecular medicine at the Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University. She is also the associate chief for clinical affairs in the same division and the medical director of the Northwestern Medicine Diabetes Training and Education Program. Dr. Aleppo's clinical research interest is particularly in the implementation of technology such as insulin pump therapy, CGMs, and automated insulin delivery in clinical practice. She has been very active in scholarly activities with over 60 publications and book chapters in journals, and is a prominent national key opinion leader in the field. One quick housekeeping note. Everyone's audio will be muted for the duration of the event, but if you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat at any time, and be on the lookout for interactive questions via the poll feature. The CDN team will be here in the background, gathering all of your questions for Dr. Aleppo and our panelists to respond at the end of the program. So to kick things off, let's get started with a brief welcome message from our partners at the ADA.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Gabe, and I serve as the Chief Scientific and Medical Officer for the American Diabetes Association. And it is my pleasure today to introduce you to this fantastic program we're about to have. It is a partnership between the American Diabetes Association and the College Diabetes Network, a long-standing partnership that we've had. And this program really is to give you the tools to help better care for young adults with diabetes. They face a number of challenges. We often don't think in the way that they think, and we need to, and that's some of what will be covered today. So you'll get tools, you'll get some helpful tips, some clinical pearls, all of that in today's session. And this is really going from A to Generation Z, and what you need to know. American Diabetes Association and the College Diabetes Network have a long-standing partnership because we want the same thing. We want people living with diabetes to live healthier lives and reduce the burden of disease for all those with diabetes. Particularly what we're talking about today are young adults. So that long history, I'll just give you two examples of ways in which we've collaborated together. One of those is the College Diabetes Network's Next Gen Fellowships. This is an opportunity to bring people in young adults that can be the future leaders in diabetes. And we really need that fresh thinking, that perspective. And one of the really wonderful things that happens as part of that program is 10 of them come to the annual scientific sessions, which if you've not attended, I recommend that you do. And they get a chance to meet all sorts of people. I've had the pleasure of meeting a number of them. They're incredibly dynamic individuals. And the hope is that attending this kind of incredible event, not only do they learn a lot more about diabetes, but it kindles something in them that many of them go on to have a career in the world of diabetes. The second area where we very much align is in our standards of care. As you know, these are the most widely followed guidelines for diabetes care that the American Diabetes Association publishes each year. And our focus has been shifting very intentionally to understanding some of the challenges that people with diabetes live with, and particularly in relation to social determinants of health, that so much of whether someone is successful in managing their diabetes is what was outside of what we think of the typical clinical encounter, whether that's food insecurity or challenges with insurance or cost of care. There are all sorts of things that play into how people can best manage their diabetes. And we as clinicians can help. And so there are ways that are in the standards care of how to screen for these social determinants of health and strategies on what to do. And then the final thing I'll mention is we both have a really strong commitment to reduce the health inequalities that exist currently. The American Diabetes Association has a Health Equity Now Bill of Rights that applies to everybody, including young adults, and it's something that we advocate for with like-minded organizations like the College Diabetes Network. So enjoy the session. I think you'll find it really informative, and thank you so much for attending.
All righty. Thank you, Dr. Gabay. Without further ado, I'm going to officially hand it over to Grazia.
There you go. Thank you so much, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I am so honored to be moderating these wonderful people today, but let's start getting to know each other. So let's see here. Let's have, I'm looking at my screen, so let's go to my left side. So let's have Cassie. Introduce yourself. Hello, Cassie.
Hi, everyone. My name's Cassie. I'm currently living in Long Island, New York. I've had diabetes for a little over 12 years, and currently I use Dexcom G6, the Omnipod DASH system, and once weekly Ozempics to monitor my blood sugar. A little bit about me. I just graduated this past May from Stony Brook University with my master's in public health and my master's of science in nutrition. And I'm currently applying to medical school, specifically osteopathic medical school. And I also work as a research assistant on a study that evaluates how diet influences microbiota populations and how that can influence mental health.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Cassie. Welcome aboard. I'll go clockwise. So have Colin. Hello, Colin. Tell us about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name's Colin. I'm 27 years old. So I don't think I'm a Gen Zer, but probably close enough for the purposes of this. I was diagnosed when I was 6. So I've been a diabetic for 21 years. I grew up in New York, outside of the city. I attended Colby College, where I played a sport, which is in Maine. And then after graduation, I moved back to New York City, where I'm currently living and working a job in finance. So this is my first event with CDN, and I'm excited to share my thoughts and experiences with you.
All right. Thank you, Colin. Shay, you're next. Tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Shay. I have had diabetes for come November 5th, 14 years, and I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. To handle my diabetes, I use the Omnipod DASH in addition to the Freestyle Libre. And a little bit about me is that I was a graduate of the class of 2020 with my bachelor's in clinical research from UNCW here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I'm also a graduate student currently pursuing my master's in clinical research and product development, also from UNCW. And as Anna has said, her involvement with CDN, I'm also a fellow in addition to Zoe Cook for the Next Gen program, and have enjoyed my time here and continue to enjoy my research within the type 1 realm.
Thank you, Shay. Fabulous. And Zoe, come on, tell us who you are.
I'll round it out. My name's Zoe. I am currently in Austin, Texas. I graduated also class of 2020. I did my undergraduate studies in psychology. I specifically focused on chronic illness in children and families, which was very interesting. I'm currently working at a children's hospital. I am working on our hematology oncology unit. And I have been accepted to start medical school in the fall, and will probably also pursue an MPH at the same time. So
you guys are smart. So I'll start asking some questions. I would like to start with Cassie. So we know there are so many factors that affect blood glucose to go up and down. And sometime throughout the day, you say, how am I going to fit my day into the diabetes, or the opposite? What thing that just would bother you a lot about your diabetes? Cassie, what do you think?
I think the most annoying thing about my diabetes is when it prevents me from being able to do something. If I have to stop a workout, or if I can't go to a class, or if I have to bow out of a social event because my blood sugar is out of range, or it was just a really frustrating day diabetes wise. I think that's when it really hits me, that it's like, oh, why me? Like, why do I have the diabetes in the family? So I would say, yeah, that's when it's most annoying.
So that's very important. So Colin, I have a question for you, the same question, because you were a hockey player. Maybe you still play hockey. By the way, I love hockey. Chicago Blackhawks. Bad news, but right now I still love hockey. So hockey. So tell me about, because I'm thinking about, some of you do Ironman. I can't even imagine, but tell me about your challenge with the hockey. So if you were doing that, what were you doing to make your life easier with the diabetes in that day? What do you do?
So when I was in college for every single year, actually, until unfortunately after my career was over, I didn't have a Dexcom or a CGM of any sort. So it was a lot of finger pricking, and the more finger pricking I did leading up to the game, the better off I'd be. But that in and of itself is a very annoying process, because, you know, by the last probably 2 hours heading into the game, you're checking every 5 minutes just to make sure you're kind of, you know, in level to play. And then, you know, usually by the end of the game, you end up in the 300 range, which is just not comfortable. And it's definitely a really tough balancing act. But at the time, the technology wasn't there. So, you know, you just did your best manually, and it was very frustrating, but kind of didn't have any other way to do it.
So we're getting a bit of a gist right now that things that stop make you what you want to do, the lack of information, like you're saying. So how technology really help you a lot to overcome them. But sometimes that's not even perfect either, right? So it's great. And so again, for let's say, so Shay, tell me about you when you were having this difficulty. How were you able to manage those days when you felt like, oh man, why me?
Definitely. So I think the best way for me to handle those days is to remember that it's not just me. So it is me, but I'm not alone. So one thing that I did, especially high school, even younger back in elementary school, is I would always try and find at least one person around me that had it or had some type of connection with it. And I feel like when I got to high school, how some people say they have that diet bestie or that diet buddy, I was able to actually find that person that, you know, okay, this person has diabetes, but I know I can talk to them about life or like school or anything else. And this person isn't just a person with diabetes, but this person is a really good friend of mine. And just to have that support system around me, and not even just external people. These people can be your family, they can be your teachers, and there's not really a limit to that, but just keeping those strong and positive people there to tell you that, okay, yeah, this is really frustrating, but we're not going to let you stay down here and be frustrated. You're going to be frustrated now. You're going to have a good 5 minutes, but you're going to get back up and keep on going and keep it moving. And just keeping people like that around me was very impactful.
That is so wonderful. In the interest of time, I'm going to go to the next question, but I'm going to ask Zoe the next question first. So the appointments have shifted in the last 1 to 2 years with COVID, being in person, on the phone. I had all sorts of adventure with my patients, driving, just pull over, something like that. So how do you feel about your appointments? Are you satisfied with your doctor? And are they too short? Are they too long? What is the dynamic between you and your provider that you really like, and how do you think can be improved? Because we want to make sure we give a message today how we can improve things. Go ahead, Zoe.
Yeah. So I think specifically addressing like the change over the past 1 to 2 years, I think it's kind of been a blessing for my relationship with my endocrinologist, because having that accessibility through telehealth or online has really just improved my access to my endo. I don't have to take the time out to go to their office. I can really access them anytime. I'm also more comfortable in my own environment, so I'm a little bit more willing to open up and really share if I'm struggling with something. I found that that's been a lot easier for me. I think as far as my dynamic with my endocrinologist, something that obviously I'm biased. I did psychology for my studies, but I think something that I'm a very, very strong advocate for is that I kind of hope that my endocrinologist would have been more aware of my well-being as just an entire human being versus just my physical diabetes health. Diabetes impacts every part of my life. That's inevitable. So my conversation with my endocrinologist, even though that they might be talking about diabetes and glucose and numbers, to me that relays is every part of my life. So as somebody with type 1, I'm balancing everything. I'm balancing sleep, exercise, food, my mental health, my personal life, my academic life, my job. So diabetes might not always come first, and that's a choice that I make. Sometimes my school has to come first. Sometimes my exercise has to come first. And so, I think that endos being more aware and on a personal level, but also letting it be known that that's okay. It's okay, and that my endocrinologist is okay with that. And instead of making my type 1 about being perfect, it's about making my whole life as good as it can be, whether that's type 1 or whether that's my school, or it's allowing me to flourish as an entire human being. So I think that's something that was always very important to me.
It's wonderful. In fact, I think that you're completely right. When I see my patients who are in college, the first thing I ask, what is your next semester schedule? Because based on that, we have to have a different conversation. I can't just focus on a glucose. In fact, very often I can make a change because it doesn't matter. It matters how much you have to work from here to there, and you have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning or at noon, right? So it depends on what you're doing. Do you eat in the right place? So for example, Shay, tell me, you just graduated. Tell me about your experience with your doctor and what could we do better to understand you this transition time of, from college to school to childhood to adulthood. Share your thoughts and your comments.
Definitely. So as Zoe said, looking at us as a full person, but also understanding that not all of us had the same experience. So what one person's pediatric experience is not another person's pediatric experience. And there's actually, a concept that some of us who didn't have such a good pediatric experience might have that scar, like, okay, now I have to find a new endocrinologist and a new care team, but I'm also in the midst of finals, but I'm also worried about how this relationship is going to be compared to my pediatric relationship, and that's extra stressors on us, in addition to some people may have been more streamlined, like this is who you should go to, these are the resources, where other ones of us were kind of just thrown in the mix. So we come from, different backgrounds, we're given different resources, and I feel like a lot of people think it's almost like a handbook you're just given when it's time to transition, and it's not like that, especially when you go to different regions or people go off to college in different places. So just being aware of people's backgrounds and, like was stated before, the social determinants of health.
Absolutely. So Colin, tell us about what anything you wish your provider would have done to facilitate the change from childhood to adulthood. What would be your recommendation for us, the providers?
I think, like Shay said, I mean, streamlining the process from there's got to be some continuity of care between your pediatrician and whoever you're going to see next. There has to be some sort of streamline for them to feed you into a colleague or some sort of recommendation system and give you options. They can't just recommend you to one and you have very limited ability to choose who you mesh well with, etc. That's kind of one end of the spectrum. And then another end of the spectrum is I wish someone at my practice had set me up with kind of like a mentor that is not necessarily another endocrinologist. It's just another person who is, either in the midst of going to college or having graduated college or recently removed. And, it's just someone that I have some sort of overlap with who maybe was in the practice, maybe not, but someone you just ask simple questions about, like, hey, I'm moving to New York City. There's, I'm working a job with tough hours, like I'm going to be up late and I want to go out and have fun with my friends. But, I have this whole other thing that I need to worry about that most people don't need to worry about. Like, am I going to be okay? Is this doable? In college, can I go out and do all the things that a college kid does? Like, that element is something that is probably extra and it might not be on the practice to provide it, but I think that the practice has access to those people and it would be a nice thing for them to provide.
So thank you. That's a very important concept. I want to add to this that, even for me, when my patients either come to college to Chicago or they leave to go to graduate school, I think that the warm handoff, so to speak, is the most important thing for me, because I send my patient to specific people that I know in a particular area that understand type 1, know how to treat them, understand technology, and they have sort of person that they can jive with them, give a couple of names. But the important thing is to introduce, I think for my colleague here in the audience, to introduce the other person and just say, hey, do you want to get this patient? Tell your colleague who you're sending to, so they get, they know about that. But also, I think it's very important is for people when they come to us, sometimes what we can do in our practice, for example, we say, do you want to go back to your pediatric endo for another visit and have this closure? Because some people are ready, some people are not. And so you need to make sure that when they're sent to me, for example, as an adult endocrinologist, I want to make sure that the patient, the person that comes to me is ready to do that transition. And we need to understand as a provider in the adult section that we need to say, are we giving the thing the patient wants right now? Sometimes people are sent back to the pediatrician because they're not ready to transition, and that's okay, because you want the patient to be successful, not miserable. Otherwise, it's like, no, none of that. So what do you guys think? So Zoe, what do you think?
I just want to ask that. I think something that would be, now, given that a lot of practices have kind of been forced to set up a telehealth option, something that I think would have been super helpful is if I could have had a joint meeting where I had my pediatric endocrinologist and my adult endo sit down together on one, now video call. If we could just have 15 minutes to sit down together and be like, okay, this is a step. Let's take it together. Like, let's hand off. I work in a hospital and we talk about with bedside care, we do an active handoff. We both go in the room and we say, okay, I'm leaving. Your next person's coming in. And I think that is just, it creates what Colin was talking about with that just feeling of continuity. And I think that's something a lot of us feel going from pediatric to adulthood is just like this break. For me, I was just given a list of 10 doctors and they said, okay, here are your options. And that was it. They said, bye, So I think that would create just that feeling of like a closure of goodbye and a new journey. And it feels like you're kind of taking that step as a team versus just you trying to jump from one to the next.
Absolutely. And so I think that when people prepare the patient for a couple of years in the future, I think it's the most important step, in my opinion, in the pediatric portion. But also, I find that when patients come to us, from exam to me, and they see them, I want to know what they need. You need to make sure they like me. I mean, I can be smart, but if I'm not driving with the person, I can't be of help. So that's something that I believe we need to be us adult endos understand how our pediatric endo colleagues and our pediatric patients come to us and what we can do for them to make them feel comfortable. Because without being comfortable, I don't care what we know, they're not going to do it. Why? Because you need to engage. Remember, when I see a patient that is a new into adult patient, the room is different, the way the room is different. We're fast. We don't have 20 people going to a room. Cha-cha-cha-cha, we need to go. So we need to explain to these young people how to get adjusted to a different, so it's like going to a new school. High school, number one, people don't know you, and you're supposed to be, hey, here I am. And you don't want to be there in the first place because you love the person you were there 2 days ago. So we need to be very aware of this emotional, and then we can work on the diabetes. That's always going to be there. So who cares, right? So we need to be very aware of this such a situation. So, but that makes me think, and I want to ask Cassie this next question. Tell me about the support. How is CDN helping you? Has it helped? What do you think support should be for your population of age? And how can we in the adult, I mean, I have all the brochure of CDN in my office, and even the adult people grab, like, you're not the right patient, shoo, leave it alone. But what do you think CDN can do for your age and for us practitioners to understand how to help you guys?
So unfortunately, my CDN experience started because my undergraduate university's accommodation office wasn't the best. So like myself and the other type 1 diabetics that ended up finding the original chapter at Binghamton University, were just so frustrated that each semester it was constantly going in and fighting for the bare minimum of accommodations, like being able to eat and drink in class, and just if our blood sugar was out of range, being able to miss class as an excused absence. I even had the counselor, the person who was supposed to be representing me in my interests and well-beings with the university, tell me that my diabetes can't be that hard to manage because his wife had gestational diabetes and was able to live a normal life. So I was just being dramatic about some of the things I was asking for. So I think something that CDN really helped me realize was that I'm not alone in my frustrations with just living with diabetes in general. There's a huge group of us that are just trying to do our best every single day and wake up and just try to be as productive as possible. Meanwhile, we're also trying to manage this chronic disease that sometimes gets out of hand regardless of how much time and effort we put into caring for ourselves. And then just in general, I think CDN gave me a lot of opportunities to learn how to be my own advocate. I ended up, once I graduated from Binghamton, going back into that office and printing out the entire ADA law and leaving it on the table for him and saying, this is why I had to come in here and fight every semester to have you give me what is rightfully mine. And it's not about getting special treatment. It's about just making the playing field equal, because the kid sitting next to me in lecture at 8 a.m. probably wasn't up 3 or 4 times in the middle of the night chasing a low, or, trying to bring down a high, or, their set probably didn't fall off in the middle of lab and they had to, in between class, go to the library bathroom and change it and whatnot. So I think just in general, the support CDN has given me has made me realize I'm not alone and has taught me how to use my voice in a productive way, because no one knows what it's like to live with diabetes like other diabetics.
So I need to say the word diabetics. I'm supposed to not to let you say it, but I'll let you say it because if you want to do it, I'm not supposed to say it. So anyway, so that's a great point. And in fact, the reason why I want to ask you the question was not only because I've had experience of some of my patients whose professors, it was just so aggravating, was not passing my patient because of a law. So I had to write this enormous letter, make a full complaint, official to the university. I'm like, you can't do this, it's illegal. And so one of the things that I advise us adult endos to become familiar, what we need to write for the letter. So I have all these templates that I write to every patient here. Here's the letter. Because see, what happens in college, you don't have the mandatory letter from the high school. Those are mandatory. In the college, they're not mandatory. But even I didn't know this either. I learned because I became educated on the topic. And so these are things that when you transition from kids to adult, us adults need to engage and say, you need this, you have a place where to pick up your insulin. Things that might seem simplistic for us in the adult realm, but these are hugely important. Something, for example, a patient of mine one time had the insulin shipped to the library in the college. Of course, it was Thanksgiving, the library was closed, so the insulin went back. So I had to ship insulin from my office on Thursday, Friday after Thanksgiving. Why? because what am I going to do? I have no answer for this poor guy. So the point is, we need to have all this little thing we need to know. And so that's where if CDN and other things, you should really try to be never alone. So if your patient don't ask you, you tell them, do you have a support system? If you had a way to figure out in school who can be your buddy for whatever reason, for the glucagon, for the ambulance, for I need some juice, I ran out of juice, whatever, fridge. So I think the support is hugely important. And I'll tell you something, you're not alone, but even the adult are alone. What I'm trying to say, if you think there are not sufficient amount of support for young adults, there are fewer for older adults and people who are in the workforce. So it's something we need to be very aware, try to improve that. So I want to ask another question to Colin. So as far as, so you are looking at a new resident, fresh out of medical school, trying to become a doctor and do what so enthusiastic they want to do. Think about Zoe in the future, okay? But she knows it, so she's not going to be bad. She knows what you do. So what about you? What would you tell somebody like me 25 years ago? What would you tell me? How would I be a good resident, a good doctor to take care of you with type 1? What would I do?
I think I would tell you to kind of dig deeper, and when you print the numbers from the Dexcom printout on the page and you look at the data, there's just so much more to the story. And I think Shay or Zoe touched on this earlier there, that sometimes you have to prioritize things that aren't diabetes. And yes, your diabetes may suffer, and the data doesn't lie, and it's very easy to point to, but I would challenge you to look underneath the data and see that the diabetic might be adjusting here and there because there's a whole other thing going on in the background that you have no idea about, because it's not the numbers on the page. All you're worried about is the trend. It would probably separate a good endocrinologist from a great one, being able to understand that there's a whole life going on in the background, and we're more than just numbers on a page. And sometimes those numbers suffer because we have to prioritize other things, but that's a conscious decision. And you should try to understand that and work with us to manage the times when diabetes is not the priority.
Two words could never be said. Zoe, you're going to become one of us, I guess, an endocrinologist, a doctor, whatever. You are in the medical profession. So what would you tell me 25 years ago? First of all, you could tell me nothing because there was no censor. So I'll be okay. Me, if I were younger today, and I'm going to be graduating and say, I want to be an endocrinologist.
I think there's three main things that I've kind of learned that I kind of like to reiterate to anybody going into endocrinology, whether it's physician, NP, educator. One of the first things is the diabetes language movement. I am a huge fan of that. I think that it's not always about what you say, but it's very important how the conversations are held. You can do more harm than good if you hold a conversation the wrong way. I know that there's been big issues with diabetes conversations triggering eating disorders and triggering OCD and those extra stressors simply because of how a conversation was held or how a question was asked. I think another thing is I would challenge you to think like a beginner. I'm not sure if you've heard that phrase before, but kind of taking a step back from formal training, taking a step back from a textbook. And when I come to you, be my teammate. Don't be my coach. Don't be my teacher. Don't lecture me. When I come to you and say, hey, I'm running low every night and I can't figure it out. Don't just look at the Dexcom and plug it onto page 52 with the hypoglycemia formula. Close the book, take a step back and dig deeper, think wide, think analytically, try and problem solve versus fitting the scenarios into your training. I don't know if that quite makes sense, but I think just taking that step back and just actively problem solving and kind of respecting what your patients bring to the table. I think sometimes I feel like my endocrinologist doesn't quite respect what I'm bringing to the table as far as information, background, experience. So just respecting that, pulling it in, and then being my teammate. Let's figure this out together and create an inclusive, non-judgmental, don't shame me, don't create doubt, just, help me out. I'm in it as much as you are. So
it's great. Thank you for saying that, because, sometimes we forget that when we address diabetes, there are so many things than just the blood glucose. There could be so much quote unquote shaming underneath it. People say, oh, you gained 2 pounds. We don't know what I've been through. So obviously we need to be very aware how we say and put always a compassion on top of everything, that we care for your best interest for the next 30 some years, but you're also living today, and today is to be just as good as 20 years from now, so we can make it just for tomorrow. So Shay, I have to ask you 2 questions. One is your having diabetes, your knowledge and your experience, how did they help you to, excuse me, to prepare to take care of yourself in college, having already the knowledge about diabetes? And then we'll segue into what did you feel, since you have for less than optimal children experience, from what I understand, what would you like to have had when you were a child? So like a diagnosis. So tell us first your maturity in terms of having diabetes, and then we say to the other information for the sake of time. Shay.
Sure. So I feel like being diagnosed so young, I was able to build that maturity over time. So by the time I got to college and I was going to be on my own, I had that experience, I had that practice. It's almost like, you finally have that final exam, except there's no grade for it. You literally just have to do it after years of practice. And I still remember being in 3rd and 4th grade, going up to my teachers and telling them, hi, I'm Shay, I have diabetes. Here's my insulin meter at the time. Here's my pump and my pen in case, something goes wrong. And it was like a script. And I would have to do that every single year. And the older that I got, it's like it became second nature. So I'd have to do it more often, especially when I got to middle school, when we have different teachers for different subjects. And then when you get to college, and just learning how people work as people was a big component, because even though you have diabetes, not everyone is going to receive that the same way. And honestly, that's okay, because not everyone is built to be on your team. And just learning that and learning who you work best with and who you don't work best with is a whole factor in growing. So especially within the diabetes realm, you have to learn, like, okay, who do I know I can trust to hop onto things if something goes wrong? And just like, how do I per se to my professor that, okay, if I'm not paying attention in class, it's not that I'm ignoring you, there just may be something wrong with my blood sugar. And honestly, if I gather all of those experiences, and from the time I was diagnosed until now, people will ask, like, what would you change? Or, would you want to have something else? Or would you wish you didn't have it? And the answer is no, because those days are hard and they're really trying sometime, but within trying times are lessons. And you have to just take the lessons and the silver linings of things, because even though diabetes has all these components that goes with it, it doesn't mean you can't use it for other parts of your life. So just learning how to, say, control my blood sugar and making sure I'm eating on time, making sure I'm taking my medications on time, to me nowadays, that looks like project management. So I'm like, okay, well, I know how I work, and I've learned not all other people with diabetes work the same way as me. I can help them. I can mentor them, almost like a manager on a job has to teach their employees. It's the same realm in a way with different steps. So, same folks, different strokes in a way.
Thank you. So Cassie, I wanted to ask you, when you were diagnosed in the hospital, tell me a little bit what would have assisted you most in your new diagnosis. The reason I'm asking this question is because there's a question in the chat that asks about some provider having some newly diagnosed young people while they just start college, and I've had the same experience. So tell us about your experience initially, and then what would you think today, with the wisdom of today and the thing we have, we can assist these young people who get diagnosed when they're going to college or the first year of college.
So I was diagnosed when I was 12. I went to my pediatrician for a yearly checkup, and he was concerned with my blood glucose levels. So he suggested I go to the emergency room. And I think something that really helped me conceptualize diabetes at such a young age, because I think medicine at that time was such a foreign topic. And I am the only diabetic in my entire family. So it was completely out of left field for all of us. Is my endo personally came down within the first few days of my diagnosis, and she sat when I was having lunch and she helped me test my blood sugar. She helped me dose my insulin out. She answered all of my questions, all of my parents' questions, but she talked to me like I was a person. And I think Zoe touched upon this a lot, is that, she understood the physical issues of my diabetes, but I think something that no one else in that time I was in the hospital touched upon was the mental wound that was being diagnosed and now like being chronically ill at such a young age. And it's something that I think is the reason why I want to go into medicine personally, is because that one meeting, I think it was like 35 minutes of her time, completely changed my perspective on what living with diabetes was. I was not broken. It was not my fault. It was not something I did, but she just made me realize that my diabetes wasn't something to fear, wasn't something to be ashamed of, but could be used as a vessel of education and opportunity. And I think it's a reason why I have such a positive outlook on my diabetes and why I want to go into healthcare in the future. So I think addressing that mentality of diabetes is something that really supported me when I was just diagnosed. And it's something she still touches upon. I still see her to this day. I'm 24. I still see my pediatric endocrinologist. Yeah, it's going to be a hard goodbye, because she sees, and I think it's a common theme of what we've all said. It's, you look at the printouts that tells such a small story. She doesn't even look at them. How's school going? How's life going? How's work? What have you been up to? She really addresses that mentality that, diabetes is there, but how are you doing as a person? And so I think that's something that helped me transition.
And so, thank you, Cassie. So if somebody were today in college, I want to a very quick phrase, because I got so many questions coming up. Today, somebody comes to college and they are newly diagnosed. What would you tell them? Calling first, just one sentence.
You can do all of the things that a normal kid would do.
What about Zoe?
It will be okay.
Awesome. What about Shay?
Enjoy the ride.
Cassie?
Fight for what you think is best for yourself, because no one else will.
Fabulous. This is great. I have some questions coming from the chat, so I want to make sure that I'm respectful of the time. So the question was, so I'll have anybody pick this question. What would be the best way for your endocrinologist to respond to your statement is a patient that everything is fine when it obviously isn't? The A1C is 9% with or many severe hypoglycemic values. So anyone pick this question to answer it. Come on, guys. Zoe, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, I'll go. I think I've been guilty of that. Where you're like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And I think part of that is just asking questions. Obviously not making an assumption from having if the A1C is 9, not making the assumption, but maybe saying, oh, okay, well, are you enjoying school? Or, if you know anything personal, you could start there. Or also saying, oh, well, I was looking at your A1C, and how do you feel about that? Are you comfortable with where it's at, or are you concerned about where it's at? Letting them kind of, I would say, inviting them to kind of share their feelings, whether that's good or bad, and just giving them the opportunity. And if you ask them about something, I find that especially I work with generally younger children, but if I can ask them a specific question, oh, well, is your diabetes affecting school? And you start asking specific questions, and sometimes you'll just find the crack that you can kind of seep into, and then that'll open the doors. But I would say as well, if they just say everything's fine, just letting them know, okay, well, I'm here for you. If it's not, if you feel like you want to reach out, I'm here for you, and we are here for you. And, just letting them know that you are there to listen when they are ready. So.
It's great. So, I call myself the diabetes detective, what you tell me is one thing, and I gotta go deep inside to figure out what's happening. So Colin, I would like to ask, since you told me such very mature information about your transition, so what do you think would have made it less abrupt for you? What would you like to see besides the list or a name? What, maybe at the age, a different age, what do you think would have been better for you or better handled at that transition time? Tell us, Colin.
Which transition time?
From pediatric endocrinologist to adult, that was a bit abrupt. And so what would have made it less abrupt? What would have made it for you more palatable or more easier to go through?
I think the handoff idea is a great idea. I mean, for me, it was longer ago than the rest of these guys. So, I'm probably forgetting exactly how it went down, but I remember being resistant to changing just because, I had been diagnosed when I was 6, and, it had been a long time since I got to know my endocrinologist, and I was finally feeling comfortable with him, and also getting to the age where I'm now managing myself more so than, my caretakers or my parents are managing me. So, the handoff would have been a big thing. But, that being said, I was pretty blessed. I would say that my practice did a pretty good job of, my endocrinologist recommended, someone that I'm still seeing to this day, and things have been going well. And, I could see how that wouldn't necessarily go well at times, but, like Shay said, there are people with different circumstances, and I happen to go to a great clinic, probably just because I live in New York City, and there's medicine is very, very competitive here, and everyone does a really good job and works really hard. So, I'm lucky to live here, and they did a great job. So, other than the handoff idea, I can't complain.
Can't complain. I tell you something, there is actually a second transition from college to the first job, to the second job, to moving from graduate school. So until you're 30, you're transitioning. So you guys have to understand that. And the honor that I have and see patients who transition to different steps, the best thing is when they come back to Chicago and they see me again, I cry, I hug them, because like, you came back to me, yeah, which means that I didn't hurt them too much when they're 18, but jokes apart. The point I'm trying to make is it's important to get the into relationship so you can develop it in the future. But for we to talk about CDN, how can you guys think that people can get involved with CDN during college to help with all these things that we've been talking about today? Anybody?
I'd say.
Go Shay.
Okay.
Okay.
Shay and then Cassie. Shay.
Okay, I'd say just get your feet wet, jump into it, because CDN has things for everyone. Whether you're that quiet kid who doesn't really want to get involved, you can get resources from online. Because I remember when I joined my sorority, and also when I moved into my dorm, I noticed that CDN already had pre-written letters for us there. And these are things that are like so instrumental for students when we go off to college that people don't always think about. And then also, if you are that person to jump out there and, get in front of the crowd, start chapters if your school doesn't have one, because, you're going to be a chapter of 1, and then you're going to be a chapter of 5 to 10, and then there's just going to be all these other students who have it or who are allies coming out of the woodworks, and you're going to touch a lot of people.
Cassie.
It's very easy to start a chapter. Like I said, I was a founding member of my chapter. CDN actually online has it all outlined, like their manifest, their constitution, all of that. And so how it was at my university was you had to have 1 semester of being like unaffiliated with the university to see if like it was something that was going to pick up traction. And it was very easy to find people. We actually found each other through the accommodation office. They had the counselors send out emails that there was talks of a diabetic support group going to be started on campus. And from then I just got tons of emails in my inbox, like, when are you meeting? What are we doing? Like, what's the plan? And then through that, we just applied through our university. I know it's different at each university, the rules and regulations. But within 1 semester, we were a full-fledged chapter with funding. It was fantastic from there on out.
That's great. I have a wonderful question here for us. So how would you tell a clinician to tell a patient to get involved with CDN? So if I didn't know about CDA, what would you tell me to tell someone?
I mean, I wouldn't tell you to tell them to do it for starter. And that is just to say, we get told what to do all of the time by our clinicians. And just, I would bring it up as like a recommendation, like, give them a pamphlet, send them to a website, get them familiar. I hear a lot of times people are like, I'm here because so-and-so told me to join. But that's not saying that people want to be there and they're not going to be invested. So once they get there and they see that these are people that they can actually connect with, or that maybe they can't connect with, that's how they're going to learn, because, you're just the clinician, but, you're not their parents per se. So it's really important to just like Zoe was saying with the language movement, there's ways that you present information to people. And sometimes you can give them the information briefly in the office, but reach out past them. So go to the university, establish those relationships, and let them know that, we're behind you, we're behind the students, so that when something comes up, you won't be clueless. Because one thing I can say from my experience is that I brought in my accommodations request. And it's like, oh, we've done this before. I had never heard of that. So it was helpful to know that my doctor knew about it, but I wish that was something that they would have told me initially that I would have had to do, because I think it was like Cassie was saying, I had a problem with the professor and almost with my grades, and I had even worse problems with housing. And I know that there's more people that go through that, because when I brought up my problems with housing, they're like, well, we've had people with diabetes before. That's just the way it is, and it shouldn't be that way.
Thank you. I've been told, last question, but what I wanted to mention was, if you guys are no colleagues of mine, in the audience, just go to CDN and just look at a bunch of brochures, they send them to you, put them in the room. Mine are always gone. I have to get some more new all the time. So the patient, when they wait for you to come in, they'll look at it, and the first time they might, but then they say, oh, I had one time at home, it's right. Let me go back and take a look. So be always on the look to say, yes, you can do this if you're interested. So last question should be, were your roommates supportive of your diabetes management, and did they know in advance that you had diabetes? So all of you, because the last question, so let's start from Colin and then end with Shay. Colin.
Yes, and my closest, I didn't have any diabetic friends at school. I didn't find out that they were there until after I had graduated, unfortunately, but so my non-diabetic friends and / roommate was my support system, and then, every time I kind of fell, they were there to pick me up.
And so Cassie, did they manage to support you in your know that you had diabetes in college, your roommates?
My roommate were aware that I was diabetic, but they didn't play an active role. I would say my friends more played an active role in supportive of my diabetes. And if I had a bad day, they were there more than I would say my roommate. But if there was like an emergency, she knew Dexcom went off. Oh, you want me to get you a juice box? She knew where the glucagon was, like basic things like that.
Great. Zoe, what about you, your experience?
I had both experiences. So I had one set of roommates that was like super fantastic. My parents had their numbers, they would call them. I had one set of roommates that was kind of counterproductive. I had one roommate that would like turn my Dexcom alarm off, even if it was going off low, and wouldn't wake me up. And so I kind of balanced both sides. But I think a crucial part of that, like Cassie was saying, is I did have my friends and my family and CDN to turn back on. And I think having that support system was far more important than my roommates ever were. I think my roommates were there for, backups and late night calls, but it was truly CDN, my parents and my family and my friends that really got me through the tough times.
Wonderful. Shay, the clock for Zoe's house just sounded, so we know the hour is gone. So the last answer, it's 8 o'clock.
Okay. Well, just like Zoe's answer, kind of, I had both experiences where most of the time it would be, my friends and my family, especially since they were close by. But I still remember first year I had, pretty supportive roommates where, I had one roommate who always kept candy in her room just in case like something went wrong. And then I get to another year where I had a roommate who thought I should turn my alarm off, almost like Zoe, because it would wake her up. And I'm like, well, I can't help you with that. So, it goes both ways. But when you have like so many friends in your vicinity and in your building, sometimes it feels like they're your roommates. So
that is wonderful. I wish I could stay any longer, but I think Anna is going to tell me to just get done because it's 1 hour is gone by. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to moderate this session. I love you guys. You're wonderful, wonderful. Hug you from afar. And so thank you so much. Thank you, CDN. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Anna, do you want to say something else at the end, or should I just finish up this
I
way?
was just going to say it has been such a fun evening to have all of you here. Thank you all for joining us after probably a long day in clinic or doing research. Our young adults are the future, and many of them are striving to be the future generation of you all in the room. So please take advantage of all the resources and support opportunities that CDN has to offer. And we'll be sending a follow-up email tomorrow should you have any additional questions with the recording. And thank you all again for joining us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Have a nice night.